And when the 50% of mountains are actually turning gold and red. But as you see on the photo, like you mentioned, there are so many spots you can go to see foliage. And you see a lot of mountains here in Korea. But I have thoroughly picked some of them.
Yeah, you have a recommendation for us?
That is right. That's what I do as a Prince Gunner, to tell you where and what to do.
Where is that?
And well, the first one that I picked is called Seoraksan, and the peak season for Seoraksan is estimated as 25th of October. So they have like it. This Seorak Mountain is like a pilgrimage for hikers and photographers to go to enjoy foliage season during the autumn. And they're located in Gangwon province, and they're like most iconic autumn destination for foliage season. Have you been there before?
Well, I've been to Seoraksan, but it was only during winter, so it was really snowy and really white. It was beautiful then,
it was still
too.
beautiful, right?
Still very beautiful, and it's a very challenging hike for beginners, you know.
During the winter, yes, with the snow, it's kind of hard, but I highly recommend you to try hiking this autumn because it's beautiful.
Will do.
Since there's a cable car, even though it's, you know, like you said, if it's kind of hard to hike, you can go ahead and try cable car because they are very cheap and convenient. You can also try like Gyeonggum Fortress, which is a course you can easily try, and you can also see panoramic views of Donghae, East Sea of Korea, when you're top of the mountains, and you can try Ulsan Bawi, Ulsan Rock Trail course.
Gyeonggumsong, huh?
Gyeonggumsong, and try Ulsan Bawi trail course because they're kind of considered to be easy trail course.
Great tip for our listeners out there who are planning to go on hiking when they do visit Korea. All right, and there's another mountain in Seoul too, because Seoraksan is a little further away.
Right. Oh, you got the point right there. I am so amazed by knowledge you have.
Geography.
Oh my goodness. But anyways, just like you mentioned, Bukhansan is located in Seoul. Actually, they're in the center of the Seoul, and the peak season of Bukhansan is estimated on November 4th. And to describe this mountain, it has granite cliffs and old fortress walls. It's popular for that. And Baegundae hiking course is, I mean, it's kind of challenging, but they have beautiful views. And if you have a hard time hiking, you can go ahead and try Dosansa Temple's valley route, which is much easier.
Okay, well, so we do have a lot of mountains within Seoul as well, where we can take a look at this autumn foliage, okay? I will go to some of them, and if any of our listeners are listening to this and are in Korea, please do check them out yourself as well. Now let's listen to our last song. This is Smashing Concrete by Woods, and I'll see you again tomorrow. Keep crunching. Bye-bye.
가 저는 만 5살에 바이올린을 시작했는데요. 바이올린 소리를 워낙 좋아했어서 그 특유의 따뜻함과 약간 사람의 목소리 같은 목소리를 갖고 있거든요, 바이올린이. 저는 무대에 올랐을 때보다는 이제 혼자 연습할 때 더 큰 희열을 느끼는데 제가 표현하고자 하는 음악이 잘 나왔을 때 그때 가장 큰 기쁨을 느끼는 것 같아요. 그래서 저만의 색깔을 어떻게 하면 찾아갈 수 있을까 그걸 제일 많이 고민하는 것 같아요. 아무래도 연습을 할 때는 이제 생각과 고민을 많이 하는 반면에 무대에서 연주할 때는 정말 머릿속을 비우고 아무 생각도 안 하려고 하는 것 같아요. 무대에서는 자유롭게 콩쿨 무대도 저만의 독주라고 생각하는 자세를 가지려고 하고 있어요. 사실 바이올린과는 거의 제 인생의 대부분을 같이 해왔기 때문에 저를 힘들게 할 때도 많지만 제가 가장 사랑하고 아끼는 존재입니다. 작곡가가 전달하고 싶은 메시지와 또 제 자신이 관객들에게 전달하고 싶은 메시지를 모두 다 설득력 있게 잘 전달할 수 있는 그런 연주자가 되고 싶습니다.
U.S. President Donald Trump is expected to visit South Korea during the APEC leaders' meeting later this month. And all eyes are now on whether he will meet China's Xi Jinping. Washington is now working to ease tensions with Beijing, with the U.S. Treasury Secretary now saying their relations with China have substantially de-escalated. Samsung Electronics posted its biggest profit since 2022, reporting an estimated operating profit of almost $8.5 billion in the third quarter. Trump also attended a major summit of world leaders in Egypt and signed the peace deal to end the war in Gaza, along with several other world leaders. All living Israeli hostages have now been freed, and there were emotional scenes as they were reunited with their families after 2 years. Hello, and thank you for joining our noon edition of Arirang News. While Seoul and Washington coordinate their next moves, the United States is also keeping dialogue open with Beijing. The U.S. Treasury Chief says President Donald Trump's planned meeting with China's Xi Jinping in South Korea signals easing tensions between Washington and Beijing. Our Pyongyang starts us off.
U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says a meeting between President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping in South Korea is still on track. In an interview with Fox Business on Monday, Bessent said there were substantial communications between the two sides over the weekend, adding that U.S. China relations have substantially de-escalated. He noted that both sides will hold additional working-level meetings this week on the sidelines of the IMF and World Bank gatherings. His comments come as both countries move to cool tensions that flared after Washington announced a potential 100% tariff on Chinese imports and Beijing tightened controls on rare earth exports.
It was a miscalculation, but we are communicating now. I am confident that we can move forward.
Bessent additionally stated that President Trump has made clear the tariffs will not take effect until November 1st, signaling that the U.S. is leaving room for diplomatic progress. He sharply criticized China's export restrictions, saying they would affect the whole world and that China has pointed a bazooka at the supply chain and industrial base of the entire free world. The Treasury Chief said the U.S. is prepared to assert its sovereignty in a variety of ways, noting that Washington is already in close contact with its allies in Europe, India, and democratic nations across Asia. He expressed optimism that Beijing remains open to talks, but warned that if not, Washington holds significant leverage to respond with equally strong or stronger countermeasures. Pyongyang, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, South Korea's Foreign Minister Cho Hyun has said Washington has presented a new alternative regarding the $350 billion investment fund, a key issue in follow-up South Korea-U.S. tariff negotiations. Speaking during a parliamentary audit on Monday, Cho said the government is reviewing an alternative proposal by Washington on how Seoul would finance the investment package. The presidential office also explained that Seoul had proposed a revised financial plan in September and received a response from Washington, but said details cannot be disclosed while negotiations are ongoing. Meanwhile, Finance Minister Koo Yoon-chol will travel to Washington on Wednesday to meet U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, with all eyes on whether the talks will provide a breakthrough on the deal. And U.S. President Donald Trump on Monday also touted the Gaza ceasefire deal, saying that it has opened the door to rebuilding. The comments came during a summit of world leaders in Egypt as the last of the Israeli hostages were returned to their families. Our Lee Seung-jae tells us more.
U.S. President Donald Trump attended a major summit of world leaders in Egypt on Monday, where he said that the Gaza ceasefire deal has opened the door to rebuilding.
And now the rebuilding begins. The rebuilding is maybe going to be the easiest part. I think we've done a lot of the hardest part because the rest comes together. We all know how to rebuild, and we know how to build better than anybody in the world.
The comments come as Trump arrived for the high-level gathering, which brought together more than 20 heads of state. He co-chaired the meeting with Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, signaling strong international support for the agreement. The ceasefire, which was agreed last week, halted Israel's massive offensive on Gaza City, which had killed scores of people daily. Under the terms of the deal, Hamas released the final 20 living Israeli hostages, while Israel freed more than 1,900 Palestinian prisoners. The agreement also includes provisions for a major increase in food and humanitarian aid entering famine-stricken Gaza. The hostage release on Monday marked a dramatic and emotional moment. The freed hostages returned to Israel after more than 2 years in captivity, where they were reunited with their families. The bodies of 28 deceased hostages are also being returned as part of the deal. According to the Times of Israel, 4 bodies were returned through the Red Cross on Monday, but no information had been given regarding the other 24. The summit and the ceasefire deal represent the most significant step toward peace since the start of the war 2 years ago, which devastated the Gaza Strip and killed tens of thousands of Palestinians. Speaking in Israel earlier in the day, Trump celebrated the U.S. brokered agreement, declaring it had effectively ended the war and opened the door to a durable peace in the Middle East. 이승재, Arirang News.
Samsung Electronics' third quarter earnings exceeded market expectations by 17%, with an operating profit worth almost $8.5 billion. The figure is the highest in 3 years, and analysts expect the positive trend to continue. Our Kim Do-yeon reports.
South Korea's largest company by market cap, Samsung Electronics, has released preliminary quarterly earnings that have significantly surpassed market forecasts. The company announced on Tuesday its preliminary earnings for the third quarter of 2025, posting an operating profit of 12.1 trillion Korean won, or $8.47 billion on sales of 86 trillion won, or $60.23 billion. These figures represent a quarter-on-quarter increase of 158.55% for operating profit, while sales saw a jump of 15.33%. Year-on-year, the increase is 31.8% for operating profit and 8.72% for sales. The operating profit exceeded the market consensus of approximately 10 trillion won by more than 17%. The 12.1 trillion won operating profit is the company's highest since the second quarter of 2022. The 86 trillion won in sales marks a record for any quarter, and it's the first time the company's quarterly revenue has surpassed the 80 trillion won threshold. The previous record for sales was 79.1 trillion won, set in the third quarter of 2024. According to an expert, the strong performance is driven by a combination of factors, with the trend likely to continue into next year.
The improved performance is due to 3 things: strong sales in AI-related memory, a surge in prices for legacy products due to supply shortages, and reduced deficits in the foundry and system LSI divisions. I expect this boom to continue through the fourth quarter.
The better-than-expected performance was reflected in the company's stock price, with shares reaching a new 52-week high of 96,000 won during intraday trading on Tuesday. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
And following Samsung Electronics' solid third quarter earnings, South Korean shares are seeing another bullish day on Tuesday, rebounding above the 3,600 mark for the first time in 2 sessions. The benchmark KOSPI went up 38.64 points, or around 1%, to 3,623 in the first 15 minutes of trading this morning. U.S. President Donald Trump's softer tone towards China also contributed to the KOSPI's reclaiming of the 3,600 mark, as U.S. stocks rebounded overnight after a sell-off on Friday local time. On Monday, the Dow Jones Industrial Average climbed 1.29% from the previous session, while the Nasdaq rose 2.21%. Meanwhile, President Lee Jae-myung has called for the prompt return of Koreans forcibly held in Cambodia after being caught up in job scams. In Tuesday's cabinet meeting, Yi called for the need to speed up establishing a coordination system with the Cambodian authorities and to place travel restrictions on areas of concern. The president also asked officials to use all available resources to secure the safety of the people and a sufficient budget for consular services. In August, a Korean college student was tortured to death in Cambodia by an organized crime gang. On the cultural front, President Yi urged for the speeding up of fiscal and regulatory reforms to boost K-culture, calling it the core of the strength of a nation, while presiding over a meeting with his aides on Monday. Our top office correspondent Yoon Jung-min has more.
Expanding the power of culture into new economic growth engines. That's what topped the agenda as President Lee Jae-myung presided over a weekly meeting with his senior aides upon returning to work after a long Chuseok holiday.
새로운 21세기 국제사회에서는 문화가 국가의 국격, 경쟁력, 국력의 핵심이라고 생각합니다.
Noting the growing presence of K-culture on the world stage, the president called for the need to create a comprehensive set of measures that can encompass the cultural ecosystem, adding that the notion of culture goes beyond music and art to dramas, food and beauty industries, and even democracy.
문화 콘텐츠 기반 확충에 필요한 재정이나 또 세제, 규제 측면에서 혁신의 속도를 내야 되겠습니다. 그리고 연계산업과의 시너지 효과를 높일 수단을 다양하게 강구해 봐야 되겠습니다.
The focus was also on ways to strengthen the social safety net for artists, as well as measures to support fine art, called upon by President Yi. On top of that, the Yi administration has upped next year's budget for the culture sector by nearly 9% to 9.6 trillion won, worth some $6.8 billion.
The budget for culture and art has been increased by 14%, including K-content funds and global K-culture hubs. The budget for tourism was increased by 9.5%, including a tourism pass for foreign visitors.
Monday's discussions were a reflection of Yi's policy priorities on taking care of people's livelihoods in the face of a tug-of-war trade talks with the U.S., as well as intensifying global uncertainties over the fresh rivalry between the U.S. and China.
대내외 여건이 어렵긴 하지만 바람이 거칠수록 또 연이 높이 나는 원리도 생각해 봐야 되겠습니다. 지금 우리가 처한 위기를 국민의 삶을 개선하는 새로운 기회로 만들 수 있도록 주권자 제1의 공복으로서 국가 역량을 단단하게 모아 나가야 되겠습니다.
윤정민, 아리랑 뉴스.
This is The World Now, bringing you the latest stories from around the globe. U.S. President Donald Trump says he is considering sending Tomahawk cruise missiles to Ukraine. Trump's remarks follow a weekend phone call with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who urged stronger U.S. support to launch counterattacks and insisted that the Tomahawks would be used only against Russian military targets. Zelensky will meet Trump in Washington on Friday to discuss air defense and long-range capabilities. However, Moscow warned that supplying Tomahawks would trigger a major escalation and further strain U.S.-Russia relations. The missile's 2,500-kilometer range would put Moscow within reach from Ukrainian territory. Trump's stance toward Vladimir Putin has hardened as ceasefire talks stalled, and now he warns Russia not to, quote, test Washington's patience. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov calls the idea, quote, of extreme concern, saying Russia cannot know whether incoming Tomahawks carry nuclear warheads. In Madagascar, weeks of protests and growing army defections have caused President Andry Rajoelina to flee the country. An opposition figure confirmed that officials acknowledged the president left Sunday on a French military plane after elite troops joined demonstrators. In a Facebook address, Razzolina said he was in a, quote, safe location and vowed not to allow Madagascar to be destroyed, yet refused to resign. France's President Emmanuel Macron urged calm and respect for constitutional order, but declined to confirm French involvement. Protests that began over power and water shortages have become a national revolt over corruption and poverty. According to the UN, at least 22 people have died in the protests, with the Senate now taking interim control and the military asserting power. Madagascar faces its worst instability in a decade. In Mexico, at least 64 people are dead, with another 65 missing after a week of torrential rain triggered flash floods and landslides across 5 states. Officials say rivers overflowed and entire neighborhoods vanished as floodwaters tore through Veracruz, Idalo, and Puebla. More than 100,000 homes are damaged and 80 communities remain cut off. Troops are airlifting food and water to isolated towns still in darkness. President Claudia Sheinbaum says thousands of troops have been deployed to the affected areas. Finally, to the U.S., where California's Governor Gavin Newsom has signed the nation's first law regulating AI chatbots, rejecting the White House calls for a hands-off approach to artificial intelligence. The new law forces chatbot operators to build in critical safety measures for users and allow lawsuits when failures cause harm. Supporters say it closes a deadly gap exposed by recent teen suicides linked to unregulated AI companions. The bill was inspired by the death of a 14-year-old boy who had exchanged suicidal messages with a chatbot modeled on a fantasy series character. Newsom said California, quote, won't stand by while companies continue without limits or accountability. Chu Ji-hyun, Arirang News.
The gloomy weather trend continues across the country. While the rain has mostly eased here in Seoul, strong intense pockets of rain are expected across southern regions by this afternoon. The parts of the south and Gangwon-do province might see rain into this evening. Then Gyeongsang-do provinces and south of Gangwon-do might see up to 60 millimeters. Jeolladam-do province will see up to 40 millimeters of showers. And as for the top temperatures, southern provinces will notice much cooler daytime highs at 21 degrees in Daegu, 25 in Gwangju, but Jeju still warm at 28 degrees. Apart from coming back from a long break, if you feel unusually tired or sluggish, please note that it's a normal biological response to the weather. We've had consistent rain for a month and a half across Korea. You'll need to be patient this week with more rain in the forecast through Saturday. Then sunshine and much colder temperatures return to the country on Sunday.
Now that is all we have for today's noon edition of Arirang News. Thank you for watching. We'll be back at 5 p.m. Korea time. Stay tuned.
Building a sustainable tomorrow. Connect, innovate, and prosper. Connecting goods to goods, region to region, people to people, generation to generation. Facilitating innovation for all, closing the digital divide. Building an inclusive technology ecosystem, promoting digital innovation by deepening dialogues on AI. Achieving shared prosperity, addressing global challenges. Energy transition, climate change, population decline, and pandemic responses. APEC-related events continuing in Seoul, the capital of the Republic of Korea, where diverse cultures blend. Jeju, the beautiful island, blessed with UNESCO Natural World Heritage Sites. Incheon, the vibrant international city, central hub, connecting Asia Pacific. Busan, the largest maritime city, centering around maritime trade and the logistics industry. And Gyeongju, the city hosting the APEC Economic Leaders Meeting, where 2,000 years of profound history and modern, trendy, and youthful energy